Welcome in, Dr. Brett Gilbert here. I have an incredible and special guest tonight. He is a well-known, world-renowned comedian
Oh yeah,
named
world
Frank
renowned,
King. He
world
is.
renowned.
He travels the world. He's traveled the country. He's got the, Frank, is this accurate? You have the Guinness Book World Record for the longest comedic road trip?
Well, it's not in Guinness book, but it is 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, no home, just a post office box and an answering service with my lovely wife, who just came along for the ride.
That is commitment. And so with that, I want to welcome in Frank King. He's a speaker, a writer, and the reason why we've joined forces tonight is because he's also a stigma fighter. And so the idea here is that we want to bring awareness to suicide prevention, suicide awareness, a better understanding of what it is about this issue that we're seeing in increased incidents across cultures, across the world. But specifically as healthcare providers, we're seeing a significant increase in the number of suicides in comparison to the regular general population. And Frank has an incredible experience with this. He's going to share that with us. He's done 4 different TED Talks, which are really great to listen. Five TED Talks, which are great to listen to, and we'll get those connections to you with the links. But what I really hope to accomplish, my intention here, Frank, is to just raise awareness about what do we need to be looking for? What do we need to be understanding so that we can, as a population, as a family member, as a friend, as a colleague, maybe be able to recognize some of the distresses that come up and how we can potentially help to educate others so that there's a greater opportunity to maybe intercept these acts. And it's just something that I feel very passionate about, and I know you do as well. So I'd like to welcome in the comedian, the man, Frank King.
Hey there, there, ho there. Yeah, so what do you want to start off with?
Yeah, I think a great way to start off is can you tell us, just by your knowledge, what is the risk factors? Like what, or even before that, what is the incidence of suicide in healthcare providers versus just, for instance, let's say the general population?
Well, before we do that, we should probably address the elephant in the room, because people who are watching this are thinking, wait a minute now, a comedian talking about depression and suicide? Just exactly how does that work? Well, I think a comedian's a good choice. A couple of reasons. One is a comedian's job always has been since the time of the court jester, to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. And I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip. Number 2, I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life, that nobody dies laughing. And number 3, depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I'll spare you the details. It's in my first TED Talk. And I myself came close enough to dying by suicide in April of 2010 that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up to me after I spoke. He'd never heard my keynote before, and he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" And we're still friends. So that's why I speak on. I've taken some training. There's what's called working minds training, which is suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety issue. And then something called QPR, question, persuade, refer. It is a curriculum. You become a gatekeeper, a QPR gatekeeper, which is kind of what we're getting ready to talk about here, in that it's your job to notice signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide, and then what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do, and and indicate we have some direct people to some resources. So the incidence of suicide in the U.S. last year, in 2018 anyway, 47,000 people. 1 every 11 minutes died by suicide, which is an epidemic in my mind. That's like 1/737 going into the ground like a lawn dart every other day, and hardly anybody's doing anything about it or talking about it. A dozen people die vaping, and there's a national movement to to solve the problem, but one person dies every hour. So and for men, it's worse in that 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide these days are men, most of them age 45 to 54, generally Caucasian, blue-collar workers, high school education, got a good union job in manufacturing out of high school, was making a middle-class wage, and then the job disappears. A lot of people think they all went to China. Only 12 to 15% of those manufacturing jobs went to China. The rest of them went to AI and robotics. So you're 51, 2 years old, your ego's tied to your job, now you're out of work, and even if you get retrained, how long is it going to take you to get back to the level you were at before you got, then begins the alcohol abuse, self-medication, opioids, because men tend not to reach out, which, by the way, we've got a book coming out next month called Guts, Grit, and Grind, a men's mental mechanical manual.
Nice.
With a psychologist very famous in the suicide prevention world, Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, who lost her brother to suicide, and Sarah Gare, who is a suicide prevention specialist, works with first responders. Sarah went to the bookstore looking for a book on men's mental health. Nothing. Went to the online, Barnes & Noble and Amazon, men's mental health. Nothing. So what we did was put together an anthology, stories of men, by men, for men, because men tend to take advice from men.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, now here's the good news. You can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it oftentimes by doing something as simple as what we're doing here, which is starting the conversation. Because I've discovered, even though people don't talk about it, if you mention it, everybody's got a story.
Connection.
And also good news, 8 out of 10 people, roughly, who are contemplating suicide are ambivalent. They want somebody to say something, to step in and interrupt. So that's where we are.
Well, those are the types of facts that we really need to know, because I think, as in many cases, in most ways, a lot of us just feel powerless in many ways and don't feel like we have the ability maybe to help someone that's in despair. But I want to take one step back to something you said that I found interesting, and just to get your opinion. Obviously, you're around this, your story, you tell it with great comedic humor, but you make a very impactful story as to your situation as far as genealogically and genetically within your family. But why do you think that the conversation is so quiet? Why do you think, as you made the comment that there's a 737 lawn dart hitting the ground every other day, why do you think it's not as prominent? Is it because there's a stigma attached to it? Is it because it winds up at the person's own hands that the passing happens? What, in your opinion, creates this stigma and this lack of discussion? What's caused that?
Well, there are two kinds of two stigmas attached. One is stigma of having mental illness. A second, a wholly different stigma, thoughts of suicide. And the part of the problem is, if you give voice to your thoughts of suicide, and it happens to be to a clinician, then they may be duty bound to bring you before a judge who is considering an involuntary detention order, an IDO, and then they put you in a facility for 3 days with no belt and shoestrings. So that's one reason people don't talk about it. One reason people don't ask about it is, they may not want to know the answer to the question, because that puts them on the hook. Oh, Lord, you're depressed and suicidal. What do I do? And if it puts them on the hook, they're worried they won't say the right thing. They'll say something wrong and perhaps push somebody over the edge. So there's several factors, and there's still mental illness and thoughts of suicide, I think, are kind of where alcoholism was 60, 75 years ago, where it was a moral failing and a character flaw. And now, of course, we know that drug addiction, alcohol addiction, oftentimes an illness. It's a public health problem, not a moral failing or a character flaw.
I see.
There are still those who believe, depression is not really a thing. You need to choose joy. So I've heard that, by the way. You should choose joy. Well, unless you're talking about dishwashing liquid, don't you think I would have done that decades ago? So, people fear things they don't understand. So if we could educate them and give them, what I like to do is give them, build a mental health first responder toolkit. Put tools in your toolkit so that if somebody is honest enough to admit they're depressed and having thoughts of suicide, you know what to do. You're kind of like an EMT. You're not there to save their lives. You're just there to keep them stable and safe until the professionals arrive. And so it's like QPR is like CPR. With CPR, if I had a heart attack, pretty much everybody in the building knows what to do. You start pumping on my chest, you find the AED, and you dial 911. And the sooner you realize somebody's having a heart attack, the better chance of survival. The sooner you start the chest compressions, better chance. The sooner you get the AED and shock them, and the sooner you get into professional help, the better chance of survival. Well, QPR, same basic. The sooner you realize somebody's in crisis, the sooner you realize you get them, stabilized in a safe place, the sooner you call the professionals in and get them to a professional, the better chance of long-term survival. So it's a matter of education of the general public, and also doctors are supposed to ask two gateway questions when you go to see the physician every time you see him. He's supposed to say something on the order of, "Hey, listen, let me ask you this: have you felt hopeless in the last 2 weeks? Have you taken less joy in those social activities you used to take a great deal of joy in?" And if you answer either one of those yes, there are 7 follow-up questions that the physician is supposed to ask. But again, they may be concerned about what you're going to tell them. B, it puts them on the hook. Is there liability involved? And C, what do you do if they do say they're depressed and having thoughts of suicide? Where do you send them? Because you may have a list of places, but there's a shortage of mental health providers. So, it's a multifaceted problem. Plus, suicide scares people. I love every now and then to screw with somebody who's neuronormal. I was in Sacramento, did a couple of 3-hour trainings. I was exhausted. Get in the car with the Uber kid. He looks at me in the rearview mirror. Our eyes meet. He goes, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And every now and then I like to just tell him how I'm doing. So I go, "I'm depressed and suicidal. How about you?" And there's a silence. And he goes, "What am I supposed to say to that?" I said, "Do you really want to know?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You're supposed to ask me if I have a plan." So a little more silence. Our eyes meet in the rearview mirror. He goes, "Do you have a plan?" And then this is, I think, brilliant. He goes, "Does it involve Uber?" Oh, man.
Wow.
That's brilliant. But again, at least he was brave enough to continue the conversation, because people care. People are generally caring. They want to do something. They just don't know what to do. And that's our job, is to educate them so that when it comes up, A, they notice things. Because when you're talking to people after a suicide, "I didn't notice anything. How could I have not noticed? How come he didn't say anything? What could I have done?" There's survivor's guilt. If I just gone to have the beer with him instead of picking up the kids at soccer practice. It's called suicide postvention. You help them process all those feelings and questions after. Then you work again on suicide prevention to make sure it doesn't happen again. So.
Well, so that brings up a couple really good points. I mean, I just listening to you and understanding, so number one, it's clear that dentists, and my audience is going to be primarily dentists. There's other clinicians as well, but primarily dentists of different, interest levels and different
Sure.
specialties. So we clearly are at greater risk because the statistics would say so. And, we personally here in my community in Chicago, we lost a colleague a couple years ago, and it was sort of, it hit, everyone was in shock. No one talked much about it. And that was that,
Yep.
which I think is probably pretty typical. So first we want to understand, we recognize the stress levels. We understand the factors that could play into a dentist maybe being, in a situation where they felt that was the only solution. So
Yeah.
that's one part of it. The other part of it is we're also in an incredible position where we know patients over long periods of time, especially if, maybe you're not a specialist like me, but a general dentist. And so they might be in a great position to recognize some of these changes, to be able to sort of find some of these warning signs. So Frank, if you could speak, number one, to what is the risk of a physician dentist in regards to suicide? And number two, where can we attain this training? Like you're talking about this, it's QPR, you said?
Yeah. QPRinstitute.com.
Okay.
QPRinstitute.com. You can put in show notes. Also, there's something called mentalhealthfirstaid.com. Mentalhealthfirstaid.com. QPR, the gatekeeper, the beginning gatekeeper training is $39, I think. The mental health first aid, it takes an hour or so. The mentalhealthfirstaid.com, You go on there, you put in your zip code, you tell them how many miles you're willing to drive within a radius of where you live, and you will find innumerable opportunities to take mentalhealthfirstaid.com. It's an 8-hour class, lasts all day. They usually throw in pizza at lunch, and it costs anywhere from nothing to about 25 bucks. And you get a binder, and it covers all sorts of mental, depression, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, non-lethal self-harm, cutting, picking, burning. So it gives you a resource, so you have let's say one of your colleagues has a teenage daughter who is cutting. You go to that non-lethal self-harm and you look for the symptoms. Oh, yeah, that's her. And then it has what you can help them do about it, and then resources. That's what the binder. So I would say mentalhealthfirstaid.com, or if you want to be trained as a gatekeeper, then the gatekeeper training is $39 from the QPR Institute. It's peer-reviewed, it's evidence-based, it's good stuff.
And this is, as you had mentioned to me, this is now becoming law, correct? In certain states that this training
in
is.
Washington. Yep, in Washington State, thanks to a woman whose husband died by suicide, all the healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, osteopathic physicians, PAs, pharmacists, chiropractors, dentists, and hygienists all have to have at least 3 hours of suicide prevention CE to renew their licenses. And so last month or November, I did 5 different 3-hour programs. What happens is an endodontist, let's say, offers dentists an evening of dinner and drinks, and then a 3-hour CE. That's where I come in. And I just completed a 3-hour online on-demand suicide prevention CE. I think it's gonna be like $39, and a dentist or hygienist can go on there and do it online and pass the test, and you'll receive my program is AGD, I believe, approved for, and the state of Washington approved QPR for all those occupations. That's the curriculum they prefer, and the American Veterinary Medical Association, the AVMA, just chose QPR as their preferred curriculum. And let me tell you something about dentists. Dentists were the first ones in the top 10 or 12 occupations at risk for suicide. And one dentist, doctor, or veterinarian dies every day by suicide. One of those three.
But dentists were or globally?
In the U.S. But the dentists were the first ones to decide, hey, look, this is a problem, and we're going to do something about it. And then, because I got a call from the Seattle Study Club, they found me. They went looking for, a suicide prevention speaker, found out they had one that was a comedian, wrote jokes for Jay Leno for 20 years. And they're like, wow, that's better than a clinician. And I did a showcase for them, got vetted by the Seattle Study Club. And the dentistry as a whole is working very hard to bring the rates down. I met a guy on I did Dentistry's Got Talent. It's a competition for speakers.
Oh, wow.
Online CE, 50 speakers, each one on a topic that qualifies generally in practice management, patient relations, CE. So if you tuned in, you got CE credit. And I think 86,000 people tuned in. It's the largest online live CE presentation ever.
Wow.
And then we went on a cruise afterwards. It's done a lot today. We went on a Dentistry's Got Talent cruise. And I met a guy named Gary Cady, K-A-D-I. He has next level practice, a couple hundred practices, 41 states. And I'm wearing my suicide prevention t-shirt with a phone number on it, the 1-800 number. And he walks up to me on the ship. He goes, hey, man, I'm on this cruise to meet you. Really? I go, do tell. He goes, well, is there anybody in the United States doing a suicide prevention initiative for dentists? And I said, Gary, you're talking to him. Because I'm pretty much the first speaker who has targeted dentists and I also do veterinarians because, there's a lot of common factors there in terms of risk factors for. By the way, suicide is not the number one killer of dentists or veterinarians. It's stress exacerbated mental or physical problems, whether it's high blood pressure, heart disease, or depression, thoughts of suicide. So, the dentists deserve a pat on the back because there are some farmers. I called up several farm bureaus. They're like, yeah, we know we got a problem, but, we think it's in bad taste that you called us. Okay. you're like number 4 on the at-risk occupation for suicide.
Wow.
Your income, farmers' income's down by half since 2013. There's an embargo, or the tariffs are, China stopped buying soybeans, and they're killing themselves left and right. And I'm the one who's out of line to call up and go, hey, we should do something about this.
There's your stigma, right? There's the
there's well, because it's and physicians, I got to tell you, hospitals, no medical school or hospital wants to lead the league in physician or medical student suicides. So they tend to sweep it under the rug. He died suddenly. Really? Just exactly how did he die suddenly? Chances are that was a suicide, but they don't want to talk about it because, again, so they're resisting, where the dentists and the veterinarians, oh, by the way, construction is the #1 at-risk occupation in the U.S.
Wow.
Very male heavy. A lot of tough guys who don't need therapy because they got bootstrapped, But, it goes like this: construction, fishing, farming, construction, excavation, mining, fishing, farming, forestry, 6, and then come the white-collar occupations to round out the top, and then first responders to round out the top 10. So it's just the odd thing about, and I think I mentioned this earlier, even though nobody talks about depression or suicide, I discovered as I was preparing for my first TEDx talk that if I just mentioned it out loud, oh my God, everybody had a story. I'm on a ship one morning, can't find a place to sit. And a woman at a table for 2, empty chair, I point, she nods, I sit. She looks up, she goes, hey, are you the comedian? I go, hey, did you enjoy the comedy show? She goes, I did. I said that I'm the comedian. And she laughed. She goes, what would you have said if I told you I hated the comedy show? People tell me I look a lot like him. She goes, is comedy all you do on cruise ships? I do about a dozen weeks a year. I just got back. I did a run from Tahiti to San Diego for 2 weeks. And I'm leaving February 1st. I'll fly to Singapore and then go to Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and get off in Hong Kong. And
as
she
I
said,
said, a world-renowned comedian.
Yeah, I've been on all 7 continents. I've done comedy all over the world. She said to me, is this all you do? I said, no, I'm a public speaker. I said, if you don't mind me bragging a little bit, I just nailed down a TED Talk. She goes, I said, my first one. She goes, I love TED Talks. What's the topic? And I knew what was coming because I had this conversation many times. I said, it's depression and suicide. Started to count down in my head. 3, 2, 1. She goes, you know what, Frank? I tried to kill myself twice.
Wow.
We have just met.
Wow.
She goes, first time in college, not that serious. Second time, far more serious. I had graduated college, she said. I had graduated medical school, had the knowledge, had the equipment. She said I had the IV started in my ankle. Suicide cocktail in one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up. Phone rings. Do I answer it? She said, well, it might be somebody who would worry, come over and interrupt me. Picks up the phone, her 13-year-old son. She said, I don't know if he had a premonition or just heard something in my voice. But he said, Mom, don't do anything. So she said, I didn't give up on the idea of suicide, she said, but I didn't want to do it that day because I knew he would always feel guilty. Wasn't there something he could say or do to stop me from dying by suicide? And of course, we'll talk about in a second. There are things you can say, there are things you can do. I said, how old is he now? She said, he's 21. I said, does he know his phone call saved your life? And this became my mantra. It's going to be the name of the title of my book. It's she goes, tell him, how do you start that conversation? That's what people hire me to do. The name of my book is going to be starting the conversation on suicide, life in the exit row, because that's where I live, in the window seat and the exit row of life. Yep. I can always pop the door and go anytime. It's my superpower.
Powerful.
So anyway, and again, she was obviously somewhat ambivalent. Otherwise, she would have gone ahead and done it. And 8 out of 10 people, now 2 out of 10 people, they're going to do it. They're hell-bent on it, and there's no stopping them. But the 8 out of 10, we can do something about it if you know what to look for. Let's talk about signs and symptoms of depression.
Okay.
Depression. Eats too much, can't eat. Sleeps too much, can't sleep. Has trouble getting up in the morning, but rallies in the afternoon. Lets their personal hygiene go. So let's take the case of a dentist and a hygienist. Somebody comes in, and the last couple of appointments they were late. They were morning appointments, but lo and behold, the afternoon appointment they're a little early. So they have trouble getting up, but they rally in the afternoon. You notice that each time they've been there before, they've been pretty well coiffed, and their personal hygiene was, and and their teeth, they've been taking good care of their teeth. But you notice today, maybe she could use washing her hair, not like her to, no makeup. And you get a look in her mouth and you think, this is not her.
Mm.
Those are all signs that she may, in fact, be depressed. The question comes up, what do you say? Well, here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Trust me, I get that. Oh, my uncle, he got on fish oil. He got off all his antidepressants. I'm happy for it. What you do say is, look, we're here for you, and mean it. We know that you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. We know that depression is an illness. But the good news is with time and treatment, things will get better. And here's the deal. We have an envelope, plain white envelope. Inside of it, one sheet of paper. And it's a list of local resources, mental health resources. And these resources go from retail and insurance all the way down to Medicaid and income-based, so that money shouldn't be a barrier to getting treatment. And on the way out, we'll hand you the envelope. Nobody knows what's in there. Nobody will know that we gave you a list of mental health resources. And then I think it's important for the dentists or the staff, the team, to follow up. Wait a week and phone and say, hey, listen, we were just worried about you. Did you find a resource? Did you find some place that you could? Again, the dentist like the doctor, the hygienist like the doctor. You're on it's time crunch. You need X number of minutes per patient, and you got to get them in and get them out. And so it's going to take a little longer to take an interest. But anyway, that's the signs and symptoms. Now, if they say they're depressed, and this is the tough question to ask, I even have to practice this before I ask it. If they admit they're depressed, you have to ask them. And if you can't ask this question, you find somebody who can. Have to ask them, are you having thoughts of suicide? Now, there's an urban legend that you should never mention the S word, suicide, in front of somebody who's depressed. And I love the reasoning because it might give them the idea. Take it from me. It's crossed their mind. Suicide? What a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? If they say yes, then the protocol is, do you have a plan? And if they say they've got a plan, ask them what the plan is. And if it's detailed, then you need to get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And, or, best case, get in a car. I'm going to drop you at the mental health facility. But chances are it's going to be, and if you can't get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, you get on the phone with the Lifeline, and the volunteer will do their best to talk the phone into the hand of the person who's in crisis. Now, suicide. How do you know somebody is thinking about suicide? Again, eats too much, can't eat, sleeps too much, can't sleep. They talk about death and dying. They Google death and dying. Death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork or their music. They're giving away prized possessions. That's a very dangerous sign because they want to make sure those things go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And of those prized possessions, the top of the pyramid, if they give away a pet, an animal, that's really dangerous. And if, of course, they're collecting the means to die by suicide, whether it's buying a weapon and ammunition or stockpiling medication. Women attempt suicide 3 times as often as men. Men complete more often because they choose generally a gun. Women choose things you can come back from, but men generally choose a gun. The follow-up question, I wrote myself 2 of them. If they have a plan but it's not particularly detailed, then I would say to them, well, then let me ask you this. Are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, then this, I think, is the most important question. Okay, well, tell me why not. Make them give voice to, my family, my kids, my animals. I could never do that. And there are quite a few people that are suicidal, but they're passively suicidal. Here's something you hear them say. I'm not going to kill myself, but it wouldn't bother me if I didn't wake up tomorrow morning. That's passively suicidal. They don't have the whatever it is to take the act, to do the act. But if they just weren't here tomorrow, that would be okay. And by the way, here's another urban legend. People ask me all the time, why does so-and-so want to kill himself or herself? Chances are they didn't. chances are all they wanted to do is kill the pain, end the pain. They didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I just wanted to end the pain. So that's another misconception. So
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Frank. Just a couple of things that came up. So you mentioned in a couple different scenarios, both at your talks or your comedy routine, you're mentioning on the cruise ship. Seems like the second you say depression and suicide, people are really like willing to step up and talk about it with you, their own personal experience. Is that sort of like where everyone just feels so suppressed that no one's talking about it, that when you bring it up, all of a sudden it sort of springs out? Because I'm thinking to myself, as someone who's never had a conversation like this, as someone
yeah,
who sees patients and been practiced for years and years, I would feel like, again, bringing that stigma back into play, to ask someone, well, do you think you're going to kill yourself? That seems so like intrusive. But what I'm getting from you is that that's not the case. You mentioned earlier that people are looking for help. They're looking for someone to intervene.
mm-hmm.
So can you speak to us, to, someone, of course, with your experience too, personally, like, would you, if someone asked you those questions, would that help you in the moment? Would it bring you some solace, some relief, some feeling of compassion? Because I'm afraid that most people would think they were insulting them or pushing them further, into that act. So speak to that part, because I think that will really resonate.
Well, and because 8 out of 10 people on average are ambivalent, and 90% of people who are rolling up to suicide, 90% give hints, direct, indirect, in the week leading up to. So they want help. They want somebody to ask the question. And to answer your first question, again, I've noticed that the mere mention of the words depression and suicide out loud, I call myself the permission fairy, because it's like people have just been waiting for somebody to utter those two magic or tragic words to give voice to their feelings. And, I did my last TED Talk was down in Pensacola, and somebody said, look, you're in the first flight of speakers. You're like number 4. Then we're going to break for cookies and lemonade. Are you going to leave? And I said, I can't leave. Why can't you leave? I said, just watch what happens when we go to break. Sure enough, 6 people lined up, each one with a different story. There was a mother and daughter there who happened to be vacationing in Pensacola. Typed in Google, what to do in Pensacola. Up comes a TED Talk. There's a guy talking about suicide. So because she had lost her brother 3 months before after he moved in with her, depressed, but seemed to be getting better, and then died by suicide, she had questions for me, having gone to the edge of the abyss and looked in and come back. What do you think? Tell me the thought process. Tell me why you came back and he didn't. They just have all these unanswered questions. So yeah, I think it is. And the company I'm speaking for on January 2nd and 3rd in Iowa, they always have a safety meeting first of the year. This year it's mental health. And so their company policy is, if somebody says to you, first of all, if you notice something that I've taught them how to, notice, you are to say something. That's your part of your job here. And if somebody says to you, listen, after I heard Frank speak, I've noticed a couple of things that you've been doing, that lead me to believe you may be depressed. Are you in fact depressed? The employee who's being asked, the company policy is, you say, first of all, thank you so much for asking. Second of all, no, I'm not depressed. I just, with a new baby, I'm just not getting any sleep, and I'm just, on the ragged edge of whatever. But both the employee is supposed to ask, and the company has instructed the employee who's being asked, thank you so much for asking, letting me. So, and what this tells the employees of that company is that the management cares not only about their personal safety when it comes to machinery and, the personal protective devices, but also their personal safety in terms of mental health. So that, again, that reduces the stigma of A, being asked, and B, the worry of asking, that somebody's going to harsh you because what are you, nuts? Right. I'm not depressed.
Feel offended that you may have recognized something that would promote that stigma onto them. I get that.
Well, and I'm working with a speaker on helping him get a TED Talk and put his keynote together. And I watched 30 minutes of his current stuff, and he made no mention of mental illness at all. And then we were talking, He said, yeah, well, I left that job to go to this new job I do. He was a monk. He taught school as a monk, and the book is called From Monk to Money Manager. Well, he found that everybody who had a problem, a lot of times the root of the problem was money. And he would pray with them, but they would give them financial advice. And so he said to me, you know, Frank, I got to tell you, I watched your TED Talk, Suicide, the Secret of My Success. He goes, that's where I was in the monastery. I realized, you know, it's a great occupation, what I was doing. But I realized if I kept doing it, sooner rather than later, I was going to kill myself. My second thought was, just like me, well, what the hell have I got to lose? I can try financial planning, and if it doesn't work out, hell, I can still kill myself. So but he didn't want to put that in his talk because he said he thought people would be put off by it. And I said, no, I'm telling you, if you stand in your truth like that, and you bare your soul, and you are vulnerable on stage, especially as a man, vulnerable, you will move those people like you will not believe, especially the ones who are living with a mental illness. I had a dentist at a function I was at last January. I did a little short keynote, and I mentioned I had chronic suicidality, which means for me, the option of suicide is always on the menu. You've heard the story. Car broke down. I had three thoughts: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidality. Well, everybody else is walking out of the room. There's a woman walking toward me. This happens all the time, although not quite to this extent. She's walking toward me, and I can see she's crying. And she's a dentist. And she gets to me, and she's crying so hard she cannot speak. I said, you have chronic suicidality, don't you? She nods. I said, you didn't know it had a name. She nods. I said, you just thought you were some kind of freak. Nod. I said, well, do you have a therapist? Nod. When you get home, set an appointment. Tell the therapist everything you learned about that today. And for God's sakes, tell him you Googled it. Don't tell him you learned it from a comedian. And so a week later, I got an email from her. It said, Frank, you have changed. No, Frank, I believe I was at that dental convention simply to meet you. You've changed my life, and I cannot say that about a lot of people. So that's the power of standing in your truth and being vulnerable. And my favorite song, my theme song, is by Big and Rich, singing duo. The song is Somebody's Got to Be Unafraid to Lead the Freak Parade. And that's my job. I'll let my freak flag fly, and I rally my troops, my tribe around me, because it gives them permission to give voice.
Absolutely.
That's when they see somebody on stage who's depressed and suicidal and had a gun in his mouth, apparently high functioning, then wow, I guess it's okay to talk about that in public. And what I do is I do a Q&A with everybody after I speak, always, for as long as they want to talk. And then I say, look, I'm going to do a Q&A for individuals when we get done. Because some people here, they'll have a question they don't want to ask in front of the entire audience, like, I'm crazy, can you help me? And sure enough, 1 to half a dozen people are lined up every time with one question or another, resources, I got a friend, I got a relative, whatever. So so just by giving voice to it, it opens, people want to talk. They just have no idea how to, wait for it, start that conversation.
And so you become a flag bearer because obviously you're very obviously gifted speaker. You're funny as can be, and I love
Thank you.
We had a great chat on the phone. You were out on a cruise ship in Tahiti somewhere. We were getting acquainted, and I think for me personally, the way that this all started is I have a really great friend. His name's Dr. Christian Pavel here in Chicago. He's a true yogi, and he put it all together that he recognized the issue with suicide in dentistry and started to immediately go to what could be the solutions. So for instance, him promoting yoga amongst dentists as being an opportunity to maybe fight back some of these symptoms. But what really shocked me personally, and the reason I reached out to you and we connected on LinkedIn, was that the second I started to just tell this story that, yoga is important, we recognize, and I started to get all of these messages from all over the world. And that's the power of social media. And to me, I didn't feel uncomfortable at all bringing it up. I felt like this is clearly a problem. And if I see a problem, I want to do anything I can to try to find a solution. So to me, it was just talking about it. And I was truly blown away by the response that I got, Frank. Yep. And everything you're telling me feeds into that it's almost like you just crack the lid a little bit and it just all jumps out like everyone is like under undercover, under wraps,
Yep.
hiding. So I know you had mentioned Gary Katie to me as well when we spoke, and I know this,
Yep.
whatever initiative you have going on, I know for sure that I want to be a part of it, because I feel that anything that I hear like this, if all we have to do is talk about it, let's talk.
Well, you and I talked about the Dental Mental Network is going to do a podcast.
Yep.
And of course, I invited you on to be one of the co-hosts because we have a hygienist. It'd be nice to have a dentist so you get different perspectives. It's just, and again, the dental industry gets credit for, stepping up and going, look, this is a problem. We need to do something about it. With veterinarians, the extra element is they have access to barbiturates, and that 75% of dentists veterinarians who die by suicide die by barbiturates, whereas only 24% of the general population does. So they're working on that as well. So yeah, it's and by the way, some people resist talking about it because it can be career limiting. One of the reasons I've done the Washington State Veterinary Medical Association twice, did a breakout on stress management and suicide prevention. And one of the reasons that people are hanging from the rafters and the place is packed when I talk about suicide prevention is I'm not from a governing body in dentistry. Somebody can ask a question in that room and not worry that I'm making a mental note of who that dentist was.
Yeah.
And circle back and follow up with him because, there's licensure involved. Same with physicians. I've got a friend who has a TED Talk on physicians and suicide. She applied for a job, and they asked her in the application, have you ever been diagnosed with a mental illness? Well, she had. And then they said, have you ever taken any of these medications? And she had. And the laundry list of psychiatric conditions they had was like 3 columns. And so she realized if she answered yes to both those questions, she probably wouldn't get the job. So she checked no and no, came off her medication, and within a month or two found herself standing on the railing of a bridge, about to jump. Heard her mom say, call your mama. And so she thought, oh. So she got down off the bridge, and then she went back on medication. But, that there are career limitations depending on the industry.
This is a very complex issue because I see, as I'm starting to listen to you and your experience, stigma again with patients, would patients still trust me? Stigma with family, stigma with job and licensure. So then what it really comes down to is we need more people trained like you're describing with the QPR, with the Dental Mental Health Network, with resources, a white envelope, right, where they can call anonymously. And I think that there has to be probably a broader scale change that is going to be slow to happen. Let's be realistic, but maybe we're starting that right here by starting to talk about it, getting more people involved, getting more eyeballs in, because I'm actually going to do on this topic, which now I just feel very compelled to try to use whatever reach I have. I actually have a niece who has gone through training. She's a senior in high school. She's gone through training, more of the idea of doing the same thing you're doing, but for kids, like kids. And I think it's important that we as adults, as parents, as dentists, as anyone, get a better sense of how this is starting so early. Would you mind sharing, Frank, for us, just so we have an understanding, how far back does this go for you? Like, was this part of your childhood as well?
No, actually, well, except for finding my, when I was 4 years old, finding my great aunt in a refrigerator. Through high school, I was pretty happy-go-lucky. And then my girlfriend at the time, I went to Carolina, she went to Arizona, and so we were physically separated. And I think I was clinically depressed, although I didn't know it had a name. And then we made it through 4 years of college, still dating, got married, which was not a good idea, although she's a wonderful woman. Our goals were different. So I got very depressed because, well, selling insurance, married to the wrong woman, I thought, and I wasn't pursuing comedy, which I thought I was born to do. And I've met other entertainers, very same thought, and entrepreneurs, very same thought process. And so I remember I was driving down 163, going south in San Diego, about 5 in the afternoon, which is my worst time of day, biorhythm-wise or whatever. It's my lowest point. And that's the first time I had that thought, why don't you just kill yourself? Like, whoa, what the hell was that? And I've had those thoughts ever since. And major depressive disorder is lasts 2 days to 2 weeks generally, and recurs. And it's generally not situational. I've been most depressed in my life at some of the best times in my life. Situations can trigger it, excuse me, but it's not necessarily. And there's some neuronormal people who have a stressor like a bankruptcy or a divorce or lose a job, and they get very depressed. But it's transitory. You get medicated, and then within a couple of months or whatever, and things settle out. You come off medication. I didn't take medication until I was 60. I was using supplements from over the counter. My wife said, "Look, you're 60. For goodness sakes, ask the doctor." So I asked my physician, my general practitioner, who had, by the way, never asked me any of those questions.
Right.
I said, "I think I may need some antidepressants." He goes, "Well, tell me why." And of course, I ran down my major depressive disorder, chronic suicidality, gun in my mouth. He's like, "Okay, I'm on board." And it happened to give me something called Wellbutrin, just a shot in the dark, and it doesn't make you gain weight, which is why he gave it to me. And it worked. 150 milligrams within 2 weeks. My wife noticed. Within 3 weeks, I had this thought unbidden for the first time since high school: I like my life.
Wow.
And now I have a good life anyway, but I hadn't had that thought. So, and by the way, here's something that people watching should know, and a lot of clinicians don't know. There's now a DNA cheek swab test for psychotropics. If you're depressed, you go see your physician. Look, I want the DNA cheek swab test to see which antidepressants work best with my metabolism. And they can narrow the list from here to just like 3 or 4. It's called precision medicine. And it's been around 4 or 5 years. In the beginning, they didn't have that many conditions and that many psychotropics, but now there's a laundry list. And it helps to eliminate the lab rat, go on, taper off, go on, taper off. So if the Wellbutrin had not worked for me, I would have taken the DNA test and see if I couldn't find something that would work with my metabolism. So
wow. Well, I want to be respectful of your time frame. If I could, I wanted to just do a simple exercise with you before we get off. So I wanted to say, if you could offer 3 bits of advice to someone that might be watching this that has had suicidal thoughts, that'd be the first thing. And secondly, what would be the 3 highlight bits of advice you would give to someone who might recognize that someone is in trouble, that someone is depressed, like you said, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, not taking care of their hygiene, giving away possessions, all the things that you mentioned. So first and foremost, what would you say to someone, 3 just key things, if someone was watching this and maybe seeking this particular conversation we're having as an outlet or resource?
I think first thing I would do if they find themselves depressed and having thoughts of suicide, first of all, just as an aside, by the way, you're not alone. There's lots of us. And another aside, the people ask me about the chronic suicidality, all those thoughts of suicide. The thing is, you don't have to act on those. Just because you think it, you don't have to act on it. So what I would do, which I should have done myself years ago, is I would have myself evaluated, number 1. Go in, see a therapist, and just say, look, these are my symptoms. What do you think? Number 2, I would do the cheek swab DNA test for whatever condition they said I had to make sure I got the best medication to work with my metabolism, so I didn't have to do a lot of that lab rat on, off, on, off, on, off. And I guess the third, which is actually should be the first, is I would let the people around me know that I was living with this and struggling with this. In our book, we talk about it's all about a safe care plan, and we use automobile metaphors. My favorite is, don't you wish that men had a check engine light? So the light goes on, they go see the mental mechanic, and the guy goes, Bob, no wonder you're depressed. You're a quart low on serotonin. But if men took care of their cars as they often take care of their brains, they'd have to buy a bus pass. So you need to take care of your brain like you take care of your car. You need to do routine maintenance. You know what I mean? You need what's called a safe care plan. Mine is diet, exercise, meditation, medication. And by the way, my 5th TED Talk is called Mental Health and the Orgasm, Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly. Yeah, first one I've ever got.
Beautiful.
I know, I got a standing ovation, actually.
I'll bet.
Yeah, so it's diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication, and the other M word, masturbation.
Okay.
Because it has palliative effects. It raises DHEA and lowers cortisol and so forth. So, like taking care of a car, you need routine maintenance. Now, also, if something goes wrong with the car, you need a plan. That's why you have AAA, somebody to come to the rescue. So you need to let people know so they can be there for you. You know, people that are not going to judge. The guy I work out with every day is a retired veterinarian, and we became friends because we have all sorts of animals. And I can say to him, he said to me the other day, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm depressed and suicidal." He's not going to judge. He's not going to tell me what I should be doing. He will tell me what that looks like. I said, "Well, do you remember when you were 18 years old and every other thought you had was about sex?" He goes, "Yeah. What's your every other thought?" "Going back to bed, binge watching Netflix." So because he and I can laugh about that, and now my wife and I can laugh about that, because she didn't know I was depressed and suicidal till my TED talk. She's about to push play on YouTube. I said, "Hold on. There's some things I want to tell you that you don't know that I don't want you to find out watching that TEDx." She had no idea I was depressed, suicidal, had a gun in my mouth. But now that she knows, she can support me in ways that, when I can tell her, look, I'm really depressed. So she won't take offense, think I'm mad at her or she's done something. I say, look, I'm cycling down. I'm going to go crawl in bed. I'll see you tomorrow.
See.
But yeah, so A, get tested, A, get evaluated, B, get the DNA test, C, begin to build your safe care plan. You talk to me on a ship. That cruising and doing comedy on the ships is part of my self-care plan because I'm disconnected for the most part, except a little email and occasional phone call. And I catch up on all the stuff I'm behind on, which takes the pressure off. So that's part of my, my maintenance, my self-care plan. Now, if you know someone, some loved one or some friend that you believe is depressed and suicidal, if this point in this video, you kind of know what to look for. You know what to say and what not to say. You know that 8 out of 10 people who are contemplating suicide want somebody to interrupt. They give hints, 90% of them in the last week. So if you see something, say something. That'd be the first one. And then people say to me, and ideally, if they're really, in a crisis, if you can get them to a mental health facility, one, that's the best thing. Two, if you can get them to promise to contact a mental health facility, and follow up. People say to me, "What do I say to my friend? I think he's depressed." My general advice is, don't say anything. Just actively listen. Let them talk. And do not. And the third thing would be, do not judge. Don't say something like, if you killed yourself, you go to hell. Oh Lord. Even if you firmly believe that. If they believe that, great, then mention it. But if they don't, you don't want to layer your philosophy on top of their philosophy or your religion on top of their religion. So just listen. A friend of mine says, just co-sign their BS. Just go, oh God, oh Lord, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Just be a shoulder.
Support, right? Yeah.
Let them know you care. QBR is all about hope. Anybody, that's another myth, that is only a professional can stop a suicide. Suicide is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. And anybody can stop a suicide. Anybody, by just stepping in. And, don't worry about saying the wrong thing or the right thing. Say something.
Powerful. That's powerful, Frank. A couple things, and I just, as we start to close out, and I want to just review some of these resources, but one of the most powerful things you said to me tonight, which I think is important to reiterate, is that someone who's thinking about suicide isn't necessarily not looking to live anymore. It's that they're looking to kill the pain.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, might resonate with people to better understand. Because I know that, for instance, when we lost a member of our endodontic team here, that everyone was sort of reeling like, how could you get to that point? Like, how could you be that despondent that you think that's the only solution? But based on what you said to me, I sort of get the idea that there's just like such an overwhelming sense of pain and no understanding of how to make that pain go away. So the
Yep.
supporting ear, the bringing up the conversation, the just sort of the spreading a little love to that person, maybe that in and of itself takes the pain down just a little bit. Am I on the right track here? Like just a little
Yeah.
love goes a long way.
Yeah, because you're not there to fix them or fix the situation. You're just there to support, so they know they're not alone. There are three things, three legs to a stool, people rolling up on suicide. One is a sense of burdensomeness. People say, suicide is a selfish act, not in the mind of the person who is about to do it. They firmly believe the world would be far better off if they were gone, so it's an unselfish act in their mind.
Mm.
I had $1 million life insurance policy. I was literally worth more dead than alive to my wife. I knew she'd be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke. Number two, a social disconnectedness. People often isolate, move away, or stop, socializing. And the third thing is they have come to the point where, when even as a child or a baby, you have this amazing will to live. And if you are serious about suicide, you have crossed that barrier. You have already determined you are able, in fact, to end your life regardless of the pain involved. Those three things is kind of a Venn diagram, and where they intersect in the middle, that's where it's really dangerous. So if you can interrupt that, if you can give them a little bit of hope, shoulder to cry on, support, I care about you. I'll help you get, the good news is with time and medication, things will get better. I'll take the time and I'll help you get the treatment. Let them know you care, and then follow up. So that's again, because 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent, and because it is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. Anybody can stop a suicide.
Wow. Frank King, comedian extraordinaire, taking the banner of this really critical topic. And, really, I'm proud to know that dentistry is standing up. I want to be a part of that. I definitely want to support you, Frank. If you wouldn't mind, just as we close out,
Yeah.
can you tell us again about your book that you've written? Can you tell us a little bit more about where we can find your TED Talks? And then just again, if you could repeat those websites for the QPR and the mental health net. Was it Dental Mental Health Network, or was that the Facebook?
Facebook is the Dental Mental Health Network. QPR Network. QPRinstitute.com.
Okay.
And mentalhealthfirstaid.com.
Mental Health First
And
Aid.
by the mental health first aid, by the way, they have 2 levels. They're about to have 3. There's a youth version, so you learn about mental illness in kids up to, majority. And then there's an adult class. And I think they've added a senior citizens class because the illnesses are different, present differently, different symptoms for each group. So, and again, it's like free to $25 for that 8 hours, and they throw in lunch generally. And it's a great it's a great primer to learn a lot about a wide variety of illnesses and sort of decode. Because people don't really, they've got a general idea. They have a general idea what they believe mental illness looks like. They think it's a guy on the corner with a sign that says we'll work for food. That's stage 4 mental illness. That person's been failed all the way down the line. They see me, on stage, and it's like, there's a thing called standupformentalhealth.com. It's a comedy class for people. You have to have a diagnosis to get in it, a diagnosis to teach it. I've taught it. And they put on a show at the end of the class for the public and their families. And they joke about their mental illnesses, in part because people have a concept of what mental illness looks like, sounds like. If you can change perceptions, you can change prejudices. People are terrified of public speaking. Imagine doing public speaking and getting up on stage and, and telling people you're mentally ill. Tricia said, yeah, my boyfriend said he wanted to break up with me. I said, why do you want to break up with me? He said, because I want to see other people. She said, I'm bipolar. Give me a minute. I mean, to be that, stand in your truth and be that honest and be that vulnerable at a time when, as you mentioned, there's still a great deal of stigma around mental illness. But the more people who come out, the more people give everybody else cover to come out and go, that's me. That's what I want to do, is have a couple go home. I had it happen. I sent my TED talk to somebody, and I'm at a Christmas party doing comedy, and the wife worked in the business, and the husband comes up. He was just, a guest at the function. He goes, "I want to thank you for your TED talk." And I go, "Well, you're welcome." He said, "Yeah, my wife and I were watching it, and you got to the part about get your car fixed, buy a new one, or you could just kill yourself." She turns to me and she goes, "Oh my God, I thought that was just you. I had no idea that it was a thing and had a name." And I'll leave you with one last story. And this is the power of social media. It gets a bad rap for a lot of reasons, and there are good reasons too, But got an email from a guy in Switzerland last month, and he had seen my first TED talk. And he said to me, "I'm 42. I've got a lovely wife, an 8-year-old daughter, a good job." But he said, "I cannot tell you the last time I was actually happy." Mm. And he said, "I thought I was all alone. And then I saw your TED talk and I knew I was not alone." And we corresponded back and forth, several times. But I mean, that's the power of, somebody stepping up and, like I said, flying my freak flag and going, "Hey, you're not alone."
Well, Frank, I want to acknowledge you for being someone so open, vulnerable, as you mentioned, brave, a leader, to be able to take this banner and wave the flag, your freak flag, as you said, and to see it probably for you, I can imagine how incredible it must feel to constantly be opening this window for even one person to tell you their story or share with you or have this realization that maybe something they've been suffering with is something that many people suffer with. And so I just want to acknowledge you, man. You're awesome. I want to support you any way I can. I know you said you're coming to Chicago. I want to find out when that is so I can come meet you. I'm really hoping to work with you on this initiative. I know I have other colleagues that'll stand up and do it as well. So thank you for everything you're doing to help save people, protect people, educate people, and just make this world a better place. And more of us are here together.
Well, let me leave you one story. If somebody asked me if you asked me, "Are you going to kill yourself?" I would say no, even though I think about it all the time. Just the way my mind works. And then if you say, "Well, tell me why not?" Here's why not. I realized after doing it since 2018, January, all the times I've done the talk and all the people who've come up afterwards, and many of them didn't know whatever we're talking about had a name. They thought they were alone, just some kind of freak. And you could see the relief in their faces. Like the dentist, she couldn't even speak because it was such a revelation. She's crying so hard that I realized that I am sort of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown by an angel, perhaps the one that kept me from pulling the trigger, what other people's lives would be like, how they might end if I weren't there to speak and let them know they're not alone. So I thought, oh my God, I can't kill myself because I'd take all those people with me.
Yeah, there you go.
I said, somebody said to me, a friend of mine goes, "So you can't live with that?" I go, "No, dude, I can't die with that." So anyway.
And the ripple effect will continue on because you're just getting started. And man, you're the man, Frank. Frank King, comedian, extraordinary, lifesaver, brave man. And I can't wait to read your book. Watch his TED Talks. We can get those linked up on the show notes. We'll put resources in there as well. Frank King, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your effort and, quite honestly, your love. You're just a guy that, has so much care inside of you and your voice. And I'm so glad you're here and so glad to partner with you, and can't wait for what we can pull off together to help further this issue.
Well, can I leave you with one dentist story? Why dentists are so near and dear to my heart? I'm sorry, man. I keep going. One more story.
I love it. I'll take it.
Well, my dad went to elementary school through 12th grade with a gentleman, Russell Walton. And Russell he went to Carolina, graduated first in his class, Carolina Dental School, and became a dentist. And my dad died very young of a heart ailment that I have had fixed twice, a bicuspid aortic valve. And Russell was our dentist, and Russell Walton, Dr. Walton. And he'd been very close to my dad. And my mom was a single mom in the 60s, raising 2 kids on one salary, And Dr. Walton knew that the money that he would charge her for our dental work, because we didn't have particularly good teeth, would be money that could be better spent on other things as a single mother. So he never charged them. He never charges anything. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for dentists, as you might imagine. And that's why I still have all my teeth, by the way.
I want to acknowledge Dr. Walton, too, because that's a man of class, a man of humility and dignity, and he did the right thing. And now, look, let's throw him in the mix here of someone who has created the person you are. So, really,
yeah,
awesome.
These are all mine.
I love it. You got a great smile. You got a great smile. Well, Frank, let's do this again, my friend. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope that this will help people, and we're going to put the resources in here as well. I'm definitely going to take those trainings myself, and now that I understand more about this issue, I realize that we all have a tremendous power that we can put forward, just like you are, to help save people. So let's do it.
All right, man.
All right, Frank. Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for joining, and we'll keep this issue alive and talked about, and let's keep helping people, Frank. Have a great night.
See you guys.
All right, bye-bye now. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the button right here and become part of my inner circle, part of my community. Hit the notifications button, the little bell. You'll get notified the second a new video drops. And join me over here. I have lots of content for you. And don't forget, leave a comment. I love seeing what you have to say. I want to hear from you. I check them every week.